The Centre develops knowledge and practice in fashion design for sustainability. As a field of study, what does this encompass?
So what fashion design for sustainability does is it inverts the purpose and the context of fashion, because normally we think about fashion in the context of economy and growing businesses, which is something that obviously is important to an industry that is the 7th largest in the world. However, we really need to think about the context of nature and human equity as the core of fashion practice. In that way, ideas around how fashion contributes to culture, to economies, to practices, form the outer layers rather than the core. We have 3 themes through our work, which is research, knowledge exchange and education. Is there a tension at all between those 3 areas?
So the tension, I think, is between sort of making sure that we've got small gains as well as looking at the long-term benefits. So how can we work with industry and making sure that we're moving in a general good direction that moves away from capitalistic-centric growth only and looking at how we can stop the depletion of resources. But it's not a simple problem. So when small businesses are looking for a different business model, we can work with them at what that might look like and trialing, giving them space to trial, and also so sometimes looking at how students can test things for them. But we also need to make sure we're in conversation with the bigger businesses that yield so much power in the industry. So the tension is constant. So long as there's an imbalance between the North and the South, the more Western-centric way of looking at things and making sure that the localism and the local way of doing things is also respected between the wealthy and the less wealthy and the dominant and less dominant. So it's important that we actually find ourselves at that tension point so long as there's an imbalance. What are the distinctions of CSF as a community of practice?
I think one of our distinctions is our understanding of the interdependencies between each other. We come from different perspectives and different backgrounds, some of us using art practice, others using text-based work. Some of us have deep tacit knowledge from working as designers. Others have had a long-held trajectory working in academia. And I think that by recognizing the distinctions of each of these different areas and the fact that we can be complementary and we have mutual learning between each other is something that is quite important to how we work. It doesn't mean that we always agree. And I think by being able to be open and honest about that is super important. I think that another distinction is that we are specialists in fashion design for sustainability, and we've committed to that. As far as we know, we're the only research centre in the world that is looking at fashion and sustainability, although we have networks with amazing people around the world, academics, tutors, people working outside of academia who are also exploring this field. I think fashion is a social practice. It's about making things together. So inevitably, we are using the making of fashion, whether it is making its products or its systems, as a way to interact with each other. And certainly it's a very social practice. We definitely demonstrate social practice in our work. The Centre has 6 overarching objectives. One of those is to live by our values. Why is that an important objective?
We want to have sustainable working practices and participatory methods in the way we work, promoting collaborative working and moving towards better connection between our 3 pillars, which is knowledge exchange with industry, our education work and our research work. It's also really important, I think, that if we want other people to be accountable, then we need to start with ourselves. So what does it mean for us to be accountable for what we do? So how do we choose what projects or what partner to go with? And also, why do we choose what we choose to do? And how are we going to implement that? What does that mean in our day-to-day practice? So it's really important for us and for everybody in the team to have agency. If we want everyone to go towards that change, then we need to first start with ourselves. We use a range of methods and approaches at CSF. And as a designer and researcher, what are your particular approaches that you draw upon in your work?
Well, fashion is a process of making together, and as a designer by background, I'm really interested in this idea of participatory practice and how we can ensure that the voices, the ideas, the agency of all involved really can be foregrounded through the practice. So this is obviously something that's complex. It's not just about getting people into the room and being able to look at ways in which they can manifest their work. We have to really think at very deep levels around the ways in which we can use new methods and skills as designers. So it's about changing our own practice as designers. I've explored ways in which we can look at the roles of designers and designing and different archetypes of designer so that we can really nurture the skills and capabilities that are beyond the technical, beyond the aesthetic and beyond the overtly creative. I'm also really interested in the ideas around how we look at transformation design, which is also an emerging field of study in relation to fashion and sustainability. So fashion is known to be something that constantly evolves and changes. However, it doesn't transform because we are using modes and methods of making garments that are very long held. So by looking at transformation as a process of change in how we think, what we do and how we act and what we know, we can really explore the ideas through making. And I think that designers by nature are trying to challenge things and trying to question the ways that things are done. And transformation design is about questioning not just the rules, but the rules of the rules, the meta narratives of what we do. So by thinking about transformation design, it allows designers not to be constrained by ideas of the limits of nature, but to be really given the opportunity to be expansive in their perspectives about how they think about design. To paraphrase Einstein, not all that's counted counts, and not all that counts is counted. So how do you think we can really explore ways in which to recognize what is important?
As our work deals with intangible impact, it's very difficult to quantify it. So when we're talking about well-being or mindset shifts or the ecology, how can we quantify better our work? So this is definitely something that we're really looking into at the moment. And also the less visible, for example, taking time for us to evaluate and assess what is it that we do, what does it matter, and does it still, are the things that mattered before still what matters now? Knowing what we know, being the first generation in terms of us knowing that we've damaged the earth beyond repair, what is it that matters in our work that we need to continue, and what should we stop and reset? So I think there's a lot of things to be said about maybe standards. For example, in terminology, we use sustainability in so many different ways. So, with our work with government and other industry partners, we need to reset what it means. So should there be definitive standards as what sort of some of the terminology means, or a minimum standard to be able to use certain words? And also, is how English-centric might this be, and how do other languages or other countries deal with different concepts and terminology? I think this will be really important for us to be part of that work, to really think about what matters and how to best describe it.
The words sustainability, the words transformation have become very loosely used and are very familiar to people. However, the concepts, the theories, the ideas behind them are not so well understood. So I think it's really up to us, particularly at this time, to ensure that they really are taken forward in ways that can be accountable, that are valid, that are drawing on the very well-rehearsed practice of various different academics from previous years.
So what is the future of fashion design for sustainability?
Well, for us to really be able to change our belief systems, it's something that's a very long process. We are now in an era where we're really questioning all of the things that came from their previous notions of modernism, postmodernism, and I think that this is going to be something that we're really having to grapple with from a philosophical perspective as well as from a very practical, tangible perspective. So whilst the development of the more sort of tangible elements of fashion design for sustainability, looking at new ways in which we can create products, services and systems, is something that is going to become more clearly explained. I think that it's going to be much harder and much more important for us to really deeply look at the philosophy, the kind of ideas and belief systems behind what it means to be human. And I think what we wear is such an important part of understanding what it means to be have an identity. So I think that is the area of our work that is probably the most complex, but also the most exciting. Culture change, belief change is something that can be manifest through fashion.